In this video we're going to have a look at the general preferences or global preferences in Stitch Mastery. If you're using Stitch Mastery on a Mac, you will find preferences under the Stitch Mastery menu here in the top left, while if you're using on Windows, as I am, click on Tools and then you'll find Preferences underneath. And the global settings are the preferences which appear immediately as you open the Preferences dialog. So if it was the case that your dialog opened on one of the other preference options here, you want to click on the Stitch Mastery link to get these into full view. Some of these options are things that essentially were inherited from the base software that Stitch Mastery was built upon. So there are certain things that don't have a huge amount of difference to your actual use of software, but we'll go through each of them so that you know what each of them do. And you can decide if there are things that will be useful for you and select them on or off to suit. So first up we have Enable Stitch Delete with right mouse click. Now this almost does what it says on the tin. It allows you to use your right mouse button or right button on your trackpad to delete a stitch. Now what we mean by deleting a stitch, we mean replacing with the default stitch that your chart is filled with when you create one. So I'm using the dot stitch library and the default stitch that fills all of the cells is a blank knit stitch. If you're using a library based on the dash symbols, you'll have a vertical line through all of your knit stitches and each of the cells will be filled with that stitch. So essentially what it means is that I can click onto a stitch with my right button on my mouse or trackpad and replace it with the default stitch, so in this case a blank knit stitch. The next few options are definitely ones that have been inherited and not specifically created for Stitch Mastery itself. So we have Enable Animated Layout and Enable Animated Zoom. So at the moment I have these not selected, and we'll try to show you and demonstrate what this means. So first of all, I'm going to zoom out to 10%, and when that happens there's no gradual motion. The chart, you don't see it descending in size like this. It just clicks from 100% large straight to 10% small, and the same again if I click 150. You don't see it growing in size, it just changes in an instant. And the other part of that was the animated layout. So what that means is that I can drag my key elsewhere, and again we did see a little bit of animation down here in the outline view, but you don't see the key itself moving around, it just clicks over in an instant. So if we go back and turn those options on, then try zooming down to 10, you see a bit of an animated change in size, and again bringing it back. There's some animation there. It's not something you would pay to go and watch in the cinema, but there's a little bit of change. The next one is Enable Anti-Aliasing. And this is all to do with how the software calculates and displays long diagonal lines. Now, in Mac, laptops, computers, this is not applicable. The way that the graphics are dealt with in those systems is different, but in Windows there is a fairly noticeable difference. So if I turn this off, if we quickly just look at this cable symbol I have here in the chart, it's not 100% smooth, but it's not particularly jagged. And if we disable the anti-aliasing, apply and close, then you can hopefully see that there is quite a difference now. The lines here are really quite jagged in their appearance. And it doesn't scale up, but there is definitely some merit in having that enabled. You apply a close. You can see it is quite significantly smoother. Next we have Show Status Line, and again this is one of these settings that has been inherited, but you may find it useful. So As I hover my cursor over the chart, if you look down here in the bottom left, you'll see we have row 9 and columns 7, and as I move around that changes, so it's showing you where your cursor is, but if it distracts you, you can turn it off. Next we have remember last used folder, and that's obviously all to do with saving and opening files. So when you go to save a file, the software will try to direct it to the last folder that you've used, and the same if you go to open a file. Next is fill mode active. So fill mode is all about filling stitches that you have selected. So if I just click on that here, and then to actually use it I need to select some stitches and click on one of these stitches, and as you see that automatically filled all of the stitches. You also have the use of the fill mode option here in the icon menu bar, so you can select it on or off in there. Automatically arrange charts and key. This is something that we have discussed in a previous video, so I will link that below. Do not copy repeats when copying stitches. So again, does what it says on the tin. If you have a chart that has repeats as part of it and you want to copy only the stitches that are visible but not actually the fact that, for instance, I may have a repeat round these 3 stitches to be repeated 9 times, but if I only want these 3 stitches and not that kind of background context, then having this selected means that is possible. And similarly, if you do want to copy the repeat, then you'll want to deselect that. The next 2 are to do with colour. So assign aliases when colour is added to the chart key. Let's apply and close and show this in action. So here are my colours. I'm just going to zoom out a little so that we can see the full key. So as I start adding colours to the chart, in the key, my red yarn has got alias A against it, and similarly if I add another colour, the software will automatically add another letter. Now, as we've mentioned in other videos, adding colour to the chart doesn't automatically translate to adding different yarn colours to your output text, and that's because you may be using colours for guidance to highlight different things, so the software doesn't assume. But if we come into Edit Diagram Properties and click on Written Instructions, check the box for Include Colour in Written Instructions, and you'll see now that my colour A and colour B, the yarn is appearing with just the colour alias initial and not the full text. Next up, show the default colour key entry when a colour is added to the chart key. So that has happened. As we can see, white has been added to my key when I've added different colours. And finally, automatically create a backup file when saving. There's more information about the backup files in a blog post from when we released version 3, which I will link to below. So hopefully that helps you to understand some of these settings